Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, targeting that missing middle, the province will build homes on public land targeted toward middle-income workers in those communities. From teachers to healthcare workers, do you earn middle income and is renting in your community where you work becoming out of reach? After 12:30, 77% of people who died from toxic drugs last year were male. Many who are struggling work in the construction industry. What's needed to support men battling mental health and substance use issues? I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming as well on the CBC News app, our website, cbc.ca/BC, and on YouTube. You can find us at CBC Vancouver. The provincial government launched its BC Builds program this morning in North Vancouver, and we're asking you, how are you being impacted as a middle-income renter? Are you still able to live where you work? We'd love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And Premier David Eby and Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon announced the government would spend $950 million and provide up to $2 billion in low-cost financing to build homes on underused public lands in the province.
I am so proud to announce that today we are launching BC Builds, which is our initiative to leverage publicly owned land, affordable financing, key partnerships with the nonprofit sector and with local governments to build lower cost, middle income rental homes faster for British Columbians right across the province.
Now, the program aims to have construction begin on projects 12 to 18 months from conception, compared to the typical 3 to 5 years, according to the province. And the BC Build homes will range from studio apartments to 3 and 4 bedroom units, and they'd be made available to households earning between $84,780 and $191,910 a year. So that is what they're pegging as middle income earners here. And their income will be tested ahead of moving in to determine if they qualify. And for this, the BC Builds program is partnering with nonprofits and First Nations. At least 20% of the units in those buildings must rent at 20% below market rates. And that will be determined on a community by community basis. What would that mean for you? Do you fall into that income range or not? And how are rents affecting you as someone who works and perhaps earns middle income in your community? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email us too, bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest is Stephanie Allen, a housing and community development consultant. And Stephanie also used to work at BC Housing and has been kind enough to join us here in studio. Hello, welcome.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Thank you so much for joining us. When given your background as having worked with BC Housing and looking at communities, how big an issue is middle income earners not being able to rent where they work?
Yeah, it's the crisis of our time. One of the major crises in the housing kind of system is that we're seeing people who are working full time, absolutely shut out of home ownership, in ways that they weren't generations ago, but now also unable to find secure rental housing for their families in ways that they are not at risk of losing that housing. So it's an absolutely desperately needed housing supply and a response to communities, nonprofits, and individuals that have been begging for this for a long time.
What do you make of this plan then, building 20 buildings, and within that, at least 20% will need to be below market rates? And I think the Premier said today that there would be a limit to the market rates that would be charged. And the target is, within this income range between $84,000 and $191,000 per year. People would be income tested. What do you make of that plan?
I think it's gone a good distance, but I think there's a lot further this could go. So let me say what's good. It's good to turn public land into affordable housing to help others, churches or service, community service providers that have been sitting on, land that could be densified for housing. That's really, really important. It's something that, has been called for a long time. So that's a really great step. It's also a great step to see the government use their low finance rates, their low interest rates to enable the development of housing. We all know that the interest rates affect the payments every month. If you're a homeowner, you know that. If you're a renter, guess what? That affects you too, because you're covering the principal and interest payments for your landlord. So that's another really great thing. It's great to speed up the approvals process. These processes have taken way too long. We know they get bogged down in the approvals process a lot of times in municipalities where there's high contention around seeing projects go up. So that's also really positive. But I think we are looking for, and innovation happens usually in community first and then government usually catches up. But what you see is a real need for the entire supply chain of housing to change and evolve so that affordability really reaches, the people that need it most. Middle income people may look at this, they're professionals. If they can get secured tenure, if the affordability is there in perpetuity, that is really great. But that's where the details are going to have to shake out with this. Nonprofits are committed to keeping rents affordable, but the for-profit sector does not have the same incentive. I've seen purpose-built rental here in Vancouver, a studio bedroom. The first year, it meets the requirements. It's $1,600 for a 367 square foot home. The very next year, it's gone up by $800 on one turnover. That is no longer affordable, from $1,600 to $2,400 for a studio apartment. So we're leaving some details out. I think these details need to be included in this plan. So it's going to be a matter of the community and the housing sector really holding government responsible to make sure that this is affordable in perpetuity and that it meets people where they live.
My guest, Stephanie Allen, a housing and community consultant and also formerly with BC Housing. We're asking you, what are your thoughts on this BC Builds program, just announced by the province this morning? And it is a program that aims to target middle-income earners to live and rent where they work. So if you're a healthcare worker, a teacher, a firefighter, they want you to be able to live where your work is. And so the program aims to, as we heard, speed things up, begin projects 12 to 18 months from conception. That's quicker than the typical 3 to 5 years, according to the province. And who they're targeting are households earning between $84,780 and $191,910 a year. You'd have to be income tested to determine if you qualify. I want to hear from you. Does this affect you? Are you someone who earns a middle income and has found it increasingly difficult to be able to rent where you work? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. Dustin is joining us in Burnaby. Hi, Dustin. Welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thank you.
And tell us, are you a renter yourself?
Yeah, I don't think anybody in their 30s and below is ever going to be anything but a renter in this city. So me and my partner, we have a kind of creative living situation with several of our friends. We couldn't afford to live in this city, and we live in Burnaby. If we weren't, we're renting a mansion. Actually, we're taking advantage of the empty home tax. This house that was a $3 million house, and 6 of us live there. And as a result of that, we get to afford to live for a lot less than anybody else would in our situation. We couldn't rent a basement suite for what my partner and I pay. But
how many of you are there in the mansion?
There's 6 of us.
6 of you all together. Okay.
Yeah, everybody has their own bedroom, their own bathroom. It's essentially like communal living.
Right.
But it's alarming. It's great to hear about things like this, but I just have zero faith. Like, as I'm 33, I know that I will never own a home in this city. There's no hope of that. And I think the bigger thing that nobody is really asking about or thinking about is where we're going to be in 30 years. Right now it's people can barely afford to live. But 30 years from now, an entire generation of people that have been completely cut off from the ability to, put a level of just general wealth away by owning and possessing property. Like, find me somebody who's in their 60s right now, close to retirement, who rented their whole life, who is looking at a good standard of living for the next 20 years. And so I think anybody my age right now and or younger looking at this is like, this is still a Band-Aid for a really terrible situation that this city has created for us. And I know myself and my partner, the whole reason that we're saving money now is so that we can leave.
Where would you go?
We're looking at a couple of things. We're actually looking at potentially saving enough money to just purchase property outright and move to the United States. Either that or potentially out east. But, this is the only habitable corner of our country. So,
I mean, you've come up with a unique, innovative housing arrangement there. But as you say, this is something, the housing costs are potentially driving you away. And may I ask what you do and if you work in Burnaby, Dustin?
Yeah, I work in the film industry, or I did. The last year has been, I had to essentially create I started a new business for myself, and my partner manages a pest control company.
Yeah.
But we fit this demographic. Before the film industry collapsed, I had a six-figure income. I could have owned a normal home anywhere else in the world, but because I live in Canada and specifically in British Columbia, $2,000 a month for rent was what I was, used to.
Yeah, I can hear the sort of the despair, disheartedness in your voice, and yeah, you're looking at options of leaving, and that's what we're losing, right? Is people who work in those industries, in the film industry, the talent that we're losing.
I worry about folks younger than me. We've got friends in our social circle who are in their early 20s, and it's so much worse than it even was for me. I've been here for 12 years now, and I don't think that there's a good solution. I think that we are going to see a crisis evolve in the next 30 years if something really dramatic isn't done, and the city's already a shell of itself.
And this, I assume you don't think this will come fast enough then?
No. And unfortunately, the communal living situation that we have that works really, really well for us. There's 6 of us. We all love each other, and we can live in a house together. How many people can find 6 people that they can live with and cohabitate with really well? Like, it takes a while to find that.
Yeah. Dustin, really, I appreciate this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's Dustin in Burnaby.
Hey, I'm nodding all the way through.
You were. I
what
saw you. Yes.
Dustin is saying, because I think what you're hearing is that we need to continue. The innovation conversation is going to continue to happen in community,
right,
by the demands that you hear from people like Dustin. And I think there's a question about renter participation in the financial upside of paying your rent all your life to pay down the mortgage of someone else's asset. I would love to see consideration for renters to have some way of micro investing in where they live, with security of tenure, with cooperative style housing or land trusts. I mean, again, this entire supply chain needs to be rethought so that people like Dustin don't have that financial anxiety going into their later years. We're supposed to look forward to retirement. We're supposed to look forward to that time to have some independence and freedom from the day-to-day hustle of working and to enjoy some financial freedom. But we're seeing that erode for an entire generation and then down the line. So the way that intergenerational wealth has worked in the real estate system has a long and storied history. It's time to really rethink that so that everyone's benefiting and not just a few.
We're going to continue our conversation here as well, asking you if you fall in that middle income category. Does Dustin's story resonate with you? Are you having trouble being able to afford the rent? And we're talking about rent today and rental housing, the rent in the community where you work. And do you fall in this $84,000 to $1,000 income, household income per year? What would it take to enable more affordable rental housing for middle income earners? Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And Stephanie Allen is my guest, a housing and community development consultant, principal with Adinkra Strategies. It is now 12:20, 1:20 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today. And Premier David Eby was joined by other government officials for this announcement this morning. Here's Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon, followed by North Vancouver City Mayor Linda Buchanan.
People come to me all the time and tell me that they're spending half or even more than half of their income on rent. That's not affordable, and quite frankly, it's not sustainable. We want British Columbians to be able to afford their rent and all the other necessities in life, to be able to live close to where they work and raise their children in communities that they grew up with, close to their grandparents. BC Builds has been developed with middle income people in mind. The rents for BC Builds will not exceed market rent for the community. This means more households will be able to find market rent and spend less than 30% of their income on rent, guaranteeing more affordability and staying affordable over the long term. BC Builds has been developed to deliver more 2, 3, 4-bedroom homes. Some families in BC have more options in communities, and that's what we want to see as we move forward.
It should go without saying that this is an incredible day for our city. We all know that we need more housing here and across British Columbia. When we talk about housing challenges, it is important to remember, who are we talking about? I have spoken with students, young adults, seniors, and families who feel like they cannot find a place to call home that is within their reach.
That's City of North Vancouver Mayor Linda Buchanan. And before that, you heard from BC Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon. We are asking you, how are you impacted by rents as a middle income earner? Are you still able to live where you work? Are you considering leaving, like our caller Dustin? You can call us at 1-800-825-5950 or locally 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, you can reach us at bctoday@cbc.ca. And now you can also text us your thoughts if you want something quicker. And so that number is 236-330-2623. I'll repeat that. It's 236-330-2623. If you've been listening to the early edition and On the Coast in Vancouver, that would be the same number that you've been texting for their shows as well. So you can send us your thoughts by text, 236-330-2623. And my guest is Stephanie Allen, Housing and Community Development Consultant. And we're talking about this provincial government announcement this morning, launching the BC Builds Housing Strategy. And it's aimed at targeting middle income earners to be able to live where they work. And what impact does it have on communities when you have people considering, we talk about it all the time, firefighters who need to, in Vancouver, who need to live in the Fraser Valley, teachers who aren't able to live close to the school. We heard from a healthcare worker this morning who said this would mean that people can pick up shifts more quickly if they need to be on call. What is the impact on a community when you have people who must live farther away to be able to afford a home?
Yeah, this is the hollowing out that happens in our communities where, folks that are more vulnerable get hit first. Artists, people with precarious incomes, small business owners. We've seen a lot of small businesses have to pack up and leave Vancouver because of this, not only their rents, but the rents of their businesses.
Right.
Now we're talking about essential services that we absolutely need to have people living within the city. You just look at what happens when a big snowfall happens, care home staff, hospital staff, if they can't get in to work on transit and they've got to rely on, ride hailing or other services, these are major impacts now on life safety. for the people living in a community. So that's how bad it's gotten. And so, we want to recognize that all members of community are valuable. We want to have artists and small business owners, as well as people who perform essential services. And so this is a great step. But you think about this income range, and you think about $84,000 kind of on the studio 1-bedroom side at the minimum. Now, it's not saying that you can't live there if you don't make that much money, but it means if you make $70,000 or $60,000 or $50,000, you are going to be paying more of your household income in rent. So while it does create more supply, it's going to be more comfortable, obviously, for folks with higher incomes, because they'll have more left over for bread and children's braces and those kinds of things. That's really critical. But you think about where the squeeze is going to continue to happen. And we already know what's happening to our community with homelessness. We know what's happening across the province. More and more people are being pushed into being homeless, at risk, or themselves homeless. So this is an entire system. And if the system is not working well at any part of it, all other parts of it are going to get impacted.
And the BC housing program as well, obviously it wouldn't apply to people who earn more than $70,000, is that right?
Well, if they're earning $70,000, they can live in these homes.
Right.
I don't think they're saying there's a prevention. What they're saying is they're targeting this income if those folks were to pay 30% of their income in rent. This is the long-standing CMHC standard for how much a household technically should pay on rent, and that's before tax. But remember, the price of milk, the price of bread, the price of transportation, those things have been only going up. So even when people are going to pay 35, 40% of their income to get into this housing, they are then going to have to pay the same price we all do for everything else. So you can see where the lower income earners that are desperate, like people like Dustin saying, this is great, but it's that but part of it that we need to think about and continue to press government to do better.
Let's take a call from Jessica in Victoria. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
Hi, what do you think of this?
I think it's a great subsidy for the construction industry. And I don't want to be cynical about it, because I appreciate that the government's trying to do something. But the only thing that will change this is if we address the REITs, the real estate investment trusts, who outbid young families who are trying to buy homes. They are price-fixing rentals. They do minimal maintenance, and they have broken the real estate market.
Are they also able to provide rental accommodations?
Pardon me?
Are REITs also investors who come in? They are investor buyers who then
it's a
provide
company
rentals.
that is listed on the stock market that outbids young families for housing and then rents it out. The profits go to the shareholders of the stock market company, and they are price-fixing rents. And if the government builds all this housing using a public model or a private model like this, the next right-wing government that gets in will just free it to the market, because ideologically they're predisposed to do that. And guess who will buy it? The REITs will buy it.
Okay.
And I thought long and hard about the issue of housing in British Columbia, really long and hard, and what solution we can have to what is essentially a market failure, which the REITs are. And I've done my research, and I think the only solution is to restore the cooperative housing programs.
Okay, that's another part of this as well, isn't it? Jessica, thank you very much. So build, build, build seems to be the answer for this morning, but she's saying, look at that demand, looking at REITs. I don't know what the price fixing comment, what you think of that.
Well, I mean, Jessica, again, is raising an extremely important point, and that is, number one, if we've got government putting in land for free, they're putting in low-cost debt, what is everybody else putting in? Right? What are the other parts of our supply chain putting in? Can the construction companies come to the table with a cost plus contract versus one where they're working to try and maximize profit? Listen, I've worked with some of the best builders in this province, and I've worked across this province. All of them are saying they want to be a part of the solution now. They want to give back to community. So let's press them to see what else they can do to contribute from their side of the table to making things more affordable. I think the other point that Jessica's raising, which is really well, is the perpetual affordability. If this is an asset that can be bought and sold, if there's no restrictions, then what's to stop the owners that are going to qualify for this program, the developers that build this, from selling these assets in the future? These are the devils in the detail that we would love to see.
My understanding is they will be managed by nonprofits.
Some, right? Okay. So there's going to be some that are nonprofit, but there's also a stream for developers. Great, we need the for-profit developers at the table. But what are the ramifications on affordability over the long term? If they're just offering it at market, we know what's happening to the market. It's running away from us. Even rental. We used to say that was the home ownership side because, we're competing with investors now. But now we're seeing even rental markets going way out of reach for most people living in urban centers. So again, there needs to be controls on these to really deliver the affordability that the public is asking us to deliver as a community and as a sector.
Okay, I imagine you'll be watching it closely to watch for those controls. Let's quickly take a call from Robert in Maple Ridge. Hi, Robert, and you're a renter yourself.
Yes, I am, and I happen to be living in a co-op for the last 4 years. We lost our house back in '84 during the hard times then, and been renting since. However, even in a co-op here, the developers are circling the area for the land for future development. And I believe a couple of weeks ago, the BC government saved a couple of co-ops from developers in Coquitlam. What happens is, there was my hair cutter 10 years ago. She mentioned to me, Jose, that most of the people she cut hair for, their real estate friends, had 10 or 15 houses each. That was 10 years ago. So what happens, good houses are scooped up. Houses that are sort of undesirable are sort of resold. And people that have, developers and people that have houses are grab them. And so you have to be careful. Even people that qualify for housing may have several houses and still have...
what has it meant for you, Robert, to be renting since the 80s?
It means that what's going to happen to young people in the future like me at 75, you'll be looking to go back to work again.
That goes back to what we heard from Dustin earlier, the people who are retiring and are not in a great situation. Robert, thank you very much. I'm glad we got you in.
You're welcome.
That's Robert in Maple Ridge. Stephanie, as you said, you'll be watching to see, it'll be in the details, how this all plays out. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
My pleasure, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Stephanie Allen, housing and community consultant and a principal with Adrika Strategies. And Stephanie also used to work at BC Housing. It's 12:33 now, 1:33 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. And coming up, we actually have some emails on this topic, so we're going to read some of those emails for you. And we'll talk as well about mental health and issues among men who are struggling. Men made up 70% of opioid deaths, toxic drug deaths in 2023. We'll get to why that is, what are the supports that are needed for men coming up in our next half hour. Right now, it's time for a CBC News update, and here's Zara Premji.
Good afternoon. As mentioned in the first half of BC Today, the province is promising to help middle-income earners afford a home. It says with soaring costs, working families are being challenged like never before. Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon says a new program called BC Builds is being set up to provide solutions. He says rents will reflect local conditions and the costs will be set on a community-by-community basis. As well, the city of Burnaby is hoping to recover tens of thousands of dollars from the Parkland refinery following the release of smoke and an unpleasant odor last month. An equipment failure led to the release of the emissions that sparked complaints from people across many parts of Metro Vancouver. Burnaby says it cost the fire department about $30,000 because it had to call in off-duty firefighters to cover other calls that day. Now look at your weather. For the North Coast, sunny today, the high sitting near 6 degrees. For the Peace region, sunny as well, but cool and a high of +1. For the Central Interior, a mainly sunny day today, high sitting around -4. For the Boundary and Kootenay regions, Mr. Sun is with you as well. That high is sitting around 4. For the Okanagan and Southern Interior, a mix of sun and cloud, highs near 3. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, a clear day ahead. Temperatures between 7 and 10 for your high. Those are your headlines from the CBC Vancouver newsroom.
Now you have me singing that song. Oh, Mr. Sun, Sun, Mr.
Sun.
Golden
Oh, yeah.
Sun. Yes, you're taking me back to when my
What
kids
is it?
were
Please
little.
shine down on me.
Ba-dum. Yes, that's the one, Zara. That's going to be my earworm for the rest of the afternoon. Thanks for that.
You're so welcome. It's not an Usher song. I'm sorry.
It's not an Usher song. I'm still working on convincing you that he did a great job.
He did an okay job.
He did an okay job. Oh, yeah, okay. That's controversial, but we'll let you continue with your hot take. That's fine. But yes, gorgeous day. I hope you enjoy your afternoon.
You too. I'm thinking of popping the sweater off pretty soon. Yeah, it's getting warm.
There you go. Zara Premji in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back here with BC Today here on CBC. We have some emails as well on the provincial announcement launching the program called BC Builds, and they're building homes, essentially 20 buildings for targeting middle income earners. And so the hope is that this would encourage people to live where they work. And this would be for rental units. Lisa wrote us, sounds great for those folks, but what about those of us who make 40,000 to 80,000? We don't qualify for low income. We're just left out in the cold, it seems. Carla writes, we are a dual income household, both working in healthcare and are priced out of secure family housing in Vancouver. We moved to North Vancouver as my partner works at Lionsgate Hospital. We were lucky enough to be able to purchase a below market condo, 25% below market rate in perpetuity. Without this, we would be looking to leave Vancouver and potentially our healthcare careers. Thank you so much for your email. You can always let us know what you think. BC Today at cbc.ca. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us here on BC Today. I'm Michelle Eliot. You're listening to us live on CBC Radio 1, on CBC Television, and live streaming as well on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Well, a record number of people died in BC from toxic drugs last year. That grim record of over 2,500 people, according to the BC Coroner's Service, and of those who died, 77% were male. The province has identified construction sites as a high-risk workplace for overdoses. We're talking about this over this next half hour. We'd like to hear from you as well. What can be done to support men who are struggling with their mental health? And how can men working in industries with higher rates of overdoses be protected? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. You can email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. And you can now text us as well. It's 236-330-2623, 236-330-2623. I have two guests joining me for this conversation. Dr. John Ogrednichuk is a psychiatry professor at UBC and the founder of a program called Heads Up Guys. And Kurt Kashuba is the BC and Alberta Regional Manager of the Carpenters Regional Council. Hello, good afternoon to you both.
Well, good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Kurt, can you tell me a bit about what goes through your mind when you hear the number of men, the proportion of men in those toxic drug deaths, and hearing, I'm sure you know this, that the construction industry tends to be hit hard?
Yeah, no, it's very upsetting to hear about the deaths, and especially with the high population of those being males and a large population of those being construction workers. And it just seems like we need to make sure that people understand that there is help available and to get rid of some of that stigma. Because when you're in construction, your body's put through a lot. It's a very physical job. It's outdoors, often transient work where you're out of town for extended periods of time. And that can lead to working through pain and seeking ways to manage that pain with self-medication. And when you are working out of town, there can be the loneliness of not being at home, where people also tend to deal with it in ways that start with a coping mechanism and end up being dependency. And then but it is a very physical job. And that seems to be kind of the trigger, I think, for a lot of this.
It's uncertain as well, isn't it? You don't know after this project when you're going to be working next.
Yeah, Michelle, that's a saying in construction is we're working ourselves out of a job. So when you're on a project and it's coming to completion, there's that uncertainty and worry of I need to still put food on the table and pay the rent, and I don't know where I'm going next. So there's not only the physical part, but the mental part that tolls heavy on the carpenter and the construction worker as a whole.
And John, is there, we heard from Kurt there that people may turn to, unhealthy ways of coping. What have you found when it comes to how men deal generally? We're generalizing here, but how men deal with struggles like uncertainty, mental health, and loneliness?
Well, I think a lot of guys tend to keep things in and not share. One aspect of being, a good, strong man in many men's minds is being self-reliant and stoic, that you can endure a lot of hardship and sort of suffer through it, put your head down, soldier on. We've heard all the different cliches about that.
Right.
But then also, as boys are sort of socialized to be men, we're taught to distance ourselves from emotions and from communicating with others what we feel inside, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. And so we really never develop a clear capacity for communicating our emotions, our needs, putting ourselves in vulnerable positions. That's just, so-called what men don't do. And so when guys are on construction sites or otherwise, and they're suffering in some way, they just hold it in. And as we heard Bert talk about, substances are often used to cover up that pain, whether it's psychological pain or physical pain. It's a way to numb it and to soldier on. And, you're talking about the job insecurity is that if a guy is really struggling with some kind of pain, if he doesn't numb it and give himself the capacity to work the next day, he may lose his job.
John, for you as as a psychiatry professor at UBC, you work with men through your program Heads Up Guys. How do you feel when you hear those grim numbers, record numbers once again, and just how much men are affected, and as well, the percentage of people within 30 to 59 years old? What goes through your mind?
Well, it's what compels me to do what I do. I think, men's mental health in general has been something that there hasn't been a lot of public discourse about, nor academic or clinical attention. So that's one of the things that we tried to do with Heads Up Guys is sort of raise the public awareness about the struggles that men do endure, including accounting for about 75% of suicide deaths every year in Canada. That alone is a public health crisis that very few people are aware of. And we need to start developing resources and services that meet men's needs so that they'll actually reach out and use them and engage with them and hopefully benefit from them.
That phrase, services that meet men's needs, that is what we're asking our callers about today. What can be done to support men who are struggling with their mental health? And how can men working in certain industries like construction be protected? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you'd like to email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And if you'd like to text, our number is 236-330-2623. 236-330-2623. My guests are Kurt Kashuba, the BC and Alberta Regional Manager of the Carpenters Regional Council, and Dr. John Ogronichuk is a psychiatry professor at UBC and founder of Heads Up Guys. Our first caller is Davis, and Davis is joining us in Penticton. Hi, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me. Hoping my sound's coming through all right.
It sure is.
So I am coming to this as somebody who spent a lot of my early working years in trades, coming from lines of tradesmen in both sides of my family. And I then kind of transitioned into social work, currently working as a social policy analyst here in Sale-Okanagan territory. And so, I've got kind of a lived experience of seeking escape in various ways, different kinds of addictions. I wouldn't say that I ever was anything that would qualify as a hard drug user. But as far as kind of looking over my lived experience and the ways that I behaved as a teen into my 20s, now into my mid-30s, we're needing to change the social narrative around what it means to be a quote-unquote man. And I don't have a specific answer to that. But when we're looking at why did I behave in the ways that I did as a teen? Well, I was absolutely feeling like I couldn't express the emotions that I had. I learned very quickly that if I displayed anything that was perceived as quote-unquote weakness, I would be made fun of, beat up, looked down on by both the other boys and the quote-unquote, the girls that I was, of course, at the time, well, as a heterosexual male, was looking to impress, wanting to date. And so there's all of that initial pressure. There was the recognition that, if I hugged my mom in front of my friends, that wasn't cool anymore, and people might snicker at that. And so there's all of these different ways that I learned to tamp down on who I actually am. And then as I pent up those emotions, they would want to come out. But if I didn't develop the skill to process and let out those emotions in a constructive way, they would become more volatile. And so then there was, well, let's just drink because I don't want to feel, or let's smoke weed because I don't want to feel. And then that gets bottled up to the point that then maybe at some point I explode, and then I hurt a friend of mine because we're at a party and things are fine, but those emotions that are kind of being pushed into the back burner and building up over time, then with the inhibition of alcohol, let's say, that might come out, and suddenly my close friend and I are fighting. When we're sober, we would never want to do that or hurt each other. Even as far as, are we creating safe spaces for men to both talk about their emotions, but also have role modeling of how to do that? Because I think there are a lot of men out even in my Penticton community, in the communities, the other communities that I've worked in, where men don't know how to process what we might call difficult emotions, grief. Where does anger come from? Anger comes from fear. So are we able to say, hey, I'm feeling scared?
Wow.
Because men are told that you don't do that.
You've said it. You've really just articulated so much, and it's so heartening to hear that you're now working, in social work as a social policy analyst, because you've learned a lot and obviously been able to put words to your experience, to put the language to it. Davis, what a call! Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for contributing to this conversation. I want to get some reaction from my guests. Kurt, what goes through your mind hearing that? And, change the narrative about what it means to be a man, find support, find a safe space to express your feelings, and find role models as well. What's being done in construction to do that?
So, so that was all great and valid points. It probably rings true with a lot of people that have worked in trades and construction. So there is an open dialogue. I know the statistics are contrary to this, but there is a bit of a culture shift with the new generations coming into the trades, where it's almost acceptable to do a mental wellness check on your coworker if you see them struggling. So there is things like the family assistance and employee assistance programs that connect people with the right help. There's for someone who has gone down a really bad path, there is like construction rehab where it's paid for construction workers, especially with the Carpenters Regional Council. So someone can go and get treatment and hopefully recover and come out and be an advocate for helping their fellow construction workers and showing that there is an end to their struggle. It is heartening to see, and you use that word, and I'll agree. There's some positive things happening, but there must be an open dialogue between the owners of the companies, the workers, the management. It really needs to be destigmatized and have an honest conversation about people, because when it comes down to it, these are people, and these are people that work and build things that we all use in this province. So they need to be given that sort of attention.
And John, is it still a challenge to overcome that and get buy-in from people, to be involved in these kinds of programs?
Well, it is. There's just simply more need than capacity to meet the need and across all types of services. And so that being said, I think there's still a lot of people who aren't recognizing that I might need help. They may know that they don't feel good, that they're off, but don't really truly understand what's going on with them, nor do they really recognize what sort of supports and services may actually be helpful for them. So it's our job to help communicate that and raise awareness. And, that's all part of what we call mental health literacy. It's not only understanding what different mental health challenges are, what they look like, how you can support someone or support yourself, but it's also knowing what kind of resources and services are out there. And so the more we talk about it, the more we have conversations like this, the more it helps. And, I'm really grateful for the fellow who called in, really excellent reflections from his own experiences in different areas of life that he's encountered that actually say a lot. And I think, again, guys talking about this, and I think it's really important that men are part of this conversation. And I often say that men need the permission of other men to be able to reach out and ask for a hand, and that's part of what we can do for each other.
Peer support. Our next caller, Liam, actually is going to touch on that, and Liam is joining us from Vancouver. Hi there.
Hi. I work in doing some data collection on the downtown east side, especially with that street entrenched population that you see suffering so much. And, the vast majority of them are in there to relieve pain. That's how it begins for the majority of people. And, I think that what people could really benefit from at this moment is that you have these sites where you can, receive safe supplies or even, medicated opioid prescriptions. But what is lacking is the sense of community in a lot of places. And there are some that do it incredibly well, like, in the downtown, where they have peer workers who are a part of their community who, extend that hand. And it just doesn't leave people so isolated, And I think that that's a big gap in care that we're really missing right now, and that we're all sorely missing on so many different ways. It helps with destigmatizing accessing care and just in a plethora of other realms. So I think really having those people to connect them and feel cared for is what is really needed right now, especially in addictions medicine.
Wow. And so, Liam, I mean, you work, you collect this data. What kind of, how do you build that then? How do you build that community?
Well, I think it's an ongoing dialogue, but particularly for men, I think that we've had to do a lot of reflection, the male psyche on like what parts of this, traditional masculine idea are worth keeping and which are worth dispelling. And, Daniel Cox through UBC does some really interesting work where, the idea that I can do it myself doesn't really predict success when it comes to, counseling and other forms of therapy.
Yeah.
But there is an aspect of that mental grit that actually does, with men, where, that toughness that we do have can and should be celebrated. But it's just about finding that balance, and separating the wheat from the chaff.
Liam, thank you so much for sharing your observations as well. We have an email from Paula who writes, our culture requires children to suppress their emotions and needs to conform with parents' and teachers' plans. Education needs to discuss all these pressures and talk freely with respect and listening, anger management, and the influence of poor early childhood parenting and what can be done to prevent the next generation from going the same way. Paula, thank you very much. I'd love to wrap up with John, and you mentioned men need to know where the resources are. What can you share with us for the men who are listening?
Well, I think a big part of it is we need to change the narrative about guys don't reach out for help. And it may be true that men don't avail themselves of certain supports and services that are currently available, but it doesn't mean that they're not looking for help. And I'll give an example with our Heads Up Guys program at UBC. We get about 50,000 plus people coming per month to the site, per month, 50,000 plus, looking for help. So there's a clear testament through action of coming to a site like this to learn more about depression, anxiety, suicidality, look for help. We have a therapist directory on that, and it was launched roughly 2 years ago. And since that time, we've facilitated over 15,000 connections between visitors to the site and therapists on this directory. So guys do want help, but they want the help that best meets and recognizes their needs as men.
Serve men and meet them where they are. I really appreciate both of you for this conversation. I hope this is the start of more in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Dr. John Ogranichuk is a psychiatry professor at UBC, and he's a founder of a program called Heads Up Guys. And Kurt Kashuba is with the Carpenters Regional Council. Thank you so much to our callers on that topic as well. Really, really good to hear from you, and our emailer as well. You can email us on anything you hear on the show, and that address is bctoday@cbc.ca.